back to the Skullcast, the podcast that just happens to be made up of brothers who are Vikings fans and who love to talk about football. My name is Asher Whitmer, and this is my brother Christopher.
Hey.
And can you believe we're 15 weeks into this thing? I think this is our 14th. We started in reviewing week 1. No, that would make this one our 15th, right? Because we're reviewing week 15.
I think so, yeah.
Is my math correct there? So if it's interesting, I've noticed on our YouTube analytics, I've noticed that we have a faithful tribe of 6. About every video gets at least 6 views within the first couple of days. So that's exciting.
Is the YouTube staff reviewing?
Yeah. Making sure we're not violating any community standards or so yeah, I know it's been fun. Christopher and I have had fun. We really kind of just started this out of a hobby project. We spend time, probably at least an hour's worth each week, hashing out the football games as it is. It might be 10-minute WhatsApp messages back and forth every day for the duration of the week, and then a new game goes, and then we hash out again. I don't know. Maybe that's not accurate, but we just decided, hey, let's record it. Let's make a deal, especially because I think media in general does a bad job of highlighting, like they go with the brighter, flashier stories, and then even within that, like for example, I would think a Sam Darnold resurgence would be somewhat of a flashy story. Well, it doesn't get a ton. And there's I guess you have to take, because I was even thinking, who was I listening to? Somebody, and I was like, oh, they act like they sound as though they've been positive about the Vikings all season long. But why didn't you ever talk about them before? And it's like, well, maybe some of it is a gamble of like, if we give this storyline airtime now, is it going to end up to be a dud? And our network, our TV network or whatever, just like that doesn't do anything. Whereas you can almost always give any New York industry airtime, even if it is somewhat of a dud. There's loyal viewership, and so as I guess I understand, like there's plenty of fear within a team like Minnesota, or we've talked about the Chargers. Chargers kind of have that history as well, a little bit, where it's like even when things look up, ultimately at the end of the day, it kind of lets them down. And so, whatever.
Yeah. And there's not really, like, I feel like a team, a team like the Chiefs can kind of overcome the small market hump by, fielding an incredible player in Patrick Mahomes, who's just like everybody loves watching.
Or even Buffalo. Like Buffalo isn't that big of a market, is it? But they have the face of the league for them.
Yeah. I'm trying to think in other sports like a similar thing, I mean, Chicago's kind of like that, although they have not necessarily had. Well, they've had between the Bulls and their other sports, they've probably had about a dozen championships in my lifetime. But they're not nearly as like reliable as LA or New York, particularly New York, I think. And so, having someone like Michael Jordan, all those years was probably pretty helpful in getting attention.
Yeah, it is interesting. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. We've got a bunch of other cool stuff to talk about today, but it'd be interesting if somebody did a study research, like how many celebrities come from different cities, and then how much that plays into viewership within that city and of a particular sport, and then like any correlation or connection between national media airtime. That'd be interesting because you don't hear of just a ton of celebrities coming from Chicago necessarily, even. Whereas in
Yeah,
New York and LA, you'd get a lot more of that. Even San
yeah.
Francisco, perhaps, get more.
Well, part of it too is that, people might come through Chicago or like from the Midwest via Chicago, but then when they're discovered or something, they're like doing shows in New York City or LA or something.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so then those cities kind of named them. Um, one thing that kind of illustrates what a little bit what we're talking about. Again, we don't want to talk, you know, belabor this too long, but the trade of Carl Anthony Towns. I know you don't follow the NBA as closely as I do, and I'm by no means an NBA, you know, expert. But um, generally, the tenor of from my perspective and from what I've read is that people found Carl Anthony Towns kind of annoying and overrated. And then he was traded to the Knicks, and I think ultimately probably ended up being a good trade, whatever. It's sad because Minnesota really, really loved Carl Anthony Towns. But suddenly now the headlines about Carl Anthony Towns are like, is he the best? What is he, like a center? Is he the best center? And, one of the best centers in the NBA, or like all this stuff. It's just like, oh,
that's
or like
funny.
even like they talk about the big market whistle, where
Yeah,
he would get fouled, or he would I don't know what the term is, but like he would get penalized for fouls constantly, even just in the short stint that I've been watching NBA games. And he hasn't gotten nearly as many this year, even though he really hasn't changed his style of play that much. Again, maybe he has
yeah,
more than I realize. I'm by no means an NBA expert, but like it feels, it's probably a conspiracy theorist with no legs, but it feels like there's a distinct difference even with how he's ref.
yeah. Yeah, well, let's that sounds like a good conspiracy theory that
Yeah.
gives us fodder for. I did just want to say, coming back to our viewership, like I happen to know a few of the people who watch us. I don't, I know two or three. So there's a whole half of our audience is unknown to me. And there's some in that audience are Bears fans as well as primarily Bears fans, and then as well as some like a Pittsburgh Steeler fan. Um, so Bears, not Bears,
I was
Lions
gonna say,
fans.
I was like, I don't, I mean, maybe,
We have cousins that are
yeah.
Bears fans, but I don't know if they're watching our show. If they are, I apologize. Not,
If I were Bears fans, I wouldn't watch the shows for a while.
I wouldn't either. Yeah, I would kind of. No, I meant Lions and Steelers. Um, and so it's fun. Like it just is. Like this is a fun year to be a Vikings fan and a Lions fan to
And a
watch
Steelers fan. Yeah.
and a Steelers fan. Yeah, but what I mean is Steelers.
Every year is fun.
It's a fun year for Steelers, but Steelers like their franchise is such a strong historical, like
Yeah,
a strong legacy. They have even a level of expectation that is above, I think, what Lions and Vikings fans
yeah,
have.
yeah.
But um, just the fact that like you go on Twitter and all the Packers fans are like trying to find reasons to discredit whatever. I will like Lions fans, if you're on Twitter, and I know the ones that watch us are not at all this way, but like some of the Lions fans on Twitter, it's like, hey guys, you haven't won the Super Bowl yet.
Yeah,
Like tone
yeah.
it down a little bit. You haven't won it. This is a great, great season. great story for sure, 100%. There's going to be movies made about this Lions story as well as maybe even the Vikings. But so it's like you guys haven't won it yet. Like,
Yeah.
and even what's interesting is like I was thinking about this. You know, we had Stevenson was doing the skull. Did you see that
Yeah,
clip
yeah.
where he was doing the skull clap,
It's
and
always a
then they
bad
go on to
sign.
lose? And
Yeah,
it seems like he's been the brunt of like a ton of taunting this year, and then the Bears are just bad. Their
yeah,
defense is bad, and he's like committing some of the big mistakes. I have no clue. I only know him because he's shown up in some of these things. But I had to think about like you don't get that really from the Chiefs. Like even the Raiders taunt them like crazy, and it's like why waste your social capital on taunting when you're just a bad organization? Period. Like,
yeah,
and once you become like a good quality organization, you don't have to go around taunting.
yeah.
You just produce, and you are. Um,
I know. Yeah, I know the Chiefs. The Chiefs can trash talk. Like when you pick up what some of the mics are saying, but it's not very showy. It's usually directed towards players in the heat of the moment, and it's
yeah,
not it's not like in front of the camera to the crowds or anything. It's like Patrick Mahomes like going out making an incredible play and then coming back and like talking to
yeah.
whoever it was.
No, and I sorry, I was saying I was intending to differentiate two things. One between trash talk and taunting.
Sure.
Like taunting is, yeah, really trying to show up as though
Yeah.
like, yeah, stealing a skull clap like that has a form of, or to flip it for Minnesota fans, like when Ant, uh, what did he do? Well, he waved goodbye to the Denver Nuggets
Yeah.
fans.
Yeah.
Like that was taunting, and it was kind of fun to see, but it was also it's like it's really humiliating when you go in and you pretty much get sent home right away in the next round. Like
Yeah.
you weren't even that, and so it's like, well, why waste like that kind of social capital? Just go out and play. Like it's whatever. Like
I don't want
trash
Ant to
talk.
change.
Yeah, I don't either. Like that was kind of, and Ant's not the reason they lost, just to
Right.
be clear. But yeah, I was differentiating between taunting and trash talking. I think there's plenty of
Yeah.
trash talk, banter back and forth that is I find fun sometimes too. But and then also I was intending to differentiate between like to the media presence, like the
Sure.
public presence, as opposed to just on field play and activity.
Yeah.
Um. Anyway, how did we get there? What's what's the highlight? I guess is there anything you want to highlight from week 15 other than the fact that the Vikings now control their own destiny? Like that's kind
Yeah.
of as a Vikings fan, that's a big highlight, obviously.
This was an
Huge
incredible weekend for the Vikings.
a huge game for Detroit, and it's rough. It is rough. I know that if they had a healthy defense, they probably would have won. Like they Buffalo does not have a solid defense. I
Yeah.
don't know that they're that injured on defense. I think they have a couple of defenders who were injured to start the season back. So
Yeah.
I think Buffalo, and I'll get into that a little bit further when we're going to look at state of contenders. But Buffalo's defense is their weakness, and so Detroit, I think if they had a healthy defense, would have worked. As a Vikings fan, anytime I hear people complain about injuries and stuff, I'm like, hey, welcome. Like, welcome to our world. And not only that, our start of the season had some of our best offensive players injured. And so
Yeah.
I
We've
don't have just a
yeah.
ton of grief for them. At the same time, I acknowledge as a fan, like, that would be hard because they lost by 6 points in a complete offensive route. And you know that had they had even a handful of their defensive players healthy, it probably would have been a different story. But
I mean, so here's maybe this is the highlight though. So I was gonna highlight the Buffalo Detroit game. It was an incredible game. I think Josh Allen is probably MVP. Um, but maybe the thing to point out would be that like the 49ers and Detroit, and some people talk especially at the beginning of the year, how the Vikings were kind of playing this way too. I don't know if it's sustained, but like how hard the Lions and the 49ers play, but they're also becoming known as just chronically injured teams. And while that can be an incredible strategy where it's like, Pittsburgh historically is also known as one of these teams where you just go in and it's going to be rough and tumble. It's going to be hard. You're going to come away, people talk about how exhausted teams are after they play the Lions. They go on to lose the next game or whatever, um, at least at the
Philly,
beginning of the year.
Philly's Philly's often been known as a very physical team as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But it's just interesting to me. I've thought about this often with the 49ers because I feel like the last 2 years they've been the one that has kind of been the premier example of just always playing hard, and their
yeah,
players are always injured. And I
yeah.
don't necessarily know. I'm not smart enough or haven't done the research enough to know if that's an actual correlation or if they just happen to have some injury prone. I mean, Christian McCaffrey's known for being injury prone even with the Panthers.
Yeah,
Um,
I was gonna say you can't really like McCaffrey was that before he came to the
yeah,
49ers. But yeah, no.
but like I mean, now Mason's down, and some of their defense. Trying to remember, are some of their maybe it's mostly offense. Like Ayuk is out. Brock Purdy's been injured.
Bosa
Um,
wasn't Bosa out
is Bosa
um,
out? I couldn't.
against the Rams, I think so. Yeah.
Is he out? Like, is he, or was it a week to week thing?
No, I don't think he's out for this season, but I could
But
look it up
yeah,
here.
like I think, yeah, it's just interesting. Like there is, I think about it because the Vikings obviously had all kinds of injuries last year, but this year, like, so we have Darisaw. We've had a number of people go on injured reserve, but I think part of the reason, obviously, Darithow's out for the season. Obviously, McCaffrey was out for the season. We also have a young, promising corner who was out from a training camp injury. Um, I'm blanking on his name right now. But
Who
um,
what team are you talking about?
Vikings. Um,
Oh, um,
Blackman.
Ivan Pate. Oh,
So sorry, Ivan
Black
Pace is
Blackman's
on
not
injured
young.
reserve, huh?
Oh,
Makai Blackman is a young corner that we've had, and he like
oh,
did something. Anyways,
he
we
hasn't
just
played at all this year.
no, he was
Oh,
he
okay,
got
yeah.
injured in
Sorry,
training
I
camp.
just
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
he's great. I love him. I was super bummed that I
I
mean
don't know that much about him.
our corners. I mean,
Hey,
rest
Kyrie
in peace.
Jackson. What was that his name?
He's
Kyrie Jack.
yeah, Kyrie
Was
Jackson.
he a corner?
He was a corner. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean
Um.
he's got killed and
Yeah. The so like we've definitely had been decimated by injuries, but even like Ivan Pace Jr. Who was it else that went on injured reserve for 4 weeks? I mean, Addison was
I
out,
mean Cashman
Cashman,
made
but
a huge difference when
part of
it could be argued that the Vikings could be undefeated if Cashman
yeah, for sure.
played those two.
I yeah, that it's interesting. I mean, particularly because they weren't like blowouts, like they were pretty close games, and but the point I was making though is that we have had a lot of injuries, but also part of the reason it feels like we've had a lot of injuries, I think, is because the Vikings, since the new regime came in, have been very quick to like pull people out. Like, um, it happened to Aaron Jones a couple of weeks ago where they just like sat him the rest of the game, and with his what was it, like a hamstring or something, um, um,
So you're saying
Stephon
almost
Gilmore, like
precautionary.
they're very precautionary,
Yeah.
and it feels like every couple of weeks you end up with one game where it's like, oh wow, there's nobody who other than the injured reserve guys, which is kind of like, those are obviously bigger injuries, and so there's not really as much preventative stuff that you can do for that. But like it, every couple of weeks we have like a clean slate. I think because we are very like as soon as someone starts to show signs of like a growing repetitive injury, then they just take care of him and
Yeah.
let him heal for a couple of weeks, and then he's back. Um and that's something I appreciate about the Vikings. Um
Yeah.
think I
Yeah.
would think that as a player that would mean a lot, even though guys like Jefferson last year were like itching to get back into the game and they just kept sitting in because they wanted him to be fully recovered.
Yeah. 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 No, I think there could be something to that being a and maybe like I wonder if it has less to do with playing physically in a game and if it has more to do with the training camps because like
Yeah.
the Eagles and I was Myelita out for a while this year. Is that how you say his name? Myelata. Um,
Myelada. Yeah.
so maybe they had some injuries as well, but they're both their D line and their O line are bully. Like they're
Yeah.
big, and some of that is just their stature. But whereas like Minnesota, for instance, has a very small
Yeah.
defensive line. It's they're more about speed and quickness,
Yeah.
somewhat like the Cowboys actually used to be known for. Um, but like I wonder if the Eagles, because like you said, the Lions, the Niners, and actually this year the Vikings as well. Like their training camps were extremely physical,
Yeah.
and so I wonder how much that plays into how you run training camp plays into the sustained health throughout a full season. But I am grateful, like you said, that Minnesota does seem to pull people out early. Like so far this year, almost all of our well, that's not true. Yeah, Jones goes down. Darnold has gone down a couple times. Even Addison was injured there for a while. Like those feel like they could be really weighty. Obviously, Darisaw and JJ McCarthy were both season-ending injuries, but and those were weighty. Like who knows what
Yeah.
the Vikings would be doing. But it does seem like a lot of the injury news is like, oh, Aaron Jones is back in. Like we thought he'd be out a couple weeks
Yeah.
and so forth. So it's kind of fun. Okay, we have about 35 minutes here that we can finish out this episode and we'd like to do something a little different. I don't know that we've done anything quite like this. But we're gonna do. Christopher's gonna run over storylines. I don't. Maybe you have a better title, but essentially storylines that are going to be interesting to watch for the stretch run, like the final 3 weeks here before the playoffs. And we were thinking like a top five because
Yeah.
everybody does top five things. Christopher couldn't come up with a fifth, so he has four. Um, we'll see. Maybe we can get a fifth one in through the end of our conversation. And then after that, I'm going to go through a state of contenders. And basically, I've taken the let's see, one, two, three, four, the top four teams of each conference, and just evaluated if each of these teams, like, what is the thing that causes me to be like, I wonder if they can actually win a Super Bowl.
Mhm.
Um, and obviously, somebody's going to win a Super Bowl, even though they
Yeah.
have one of these things. But just kind of an overview of the state of contenders. So, Christopher, why don't you jump into your top five?
All right. So
for
my
your
my
top four?
top four. Um, I I kind of ranked them, but since I don't have a fifth one, then I don't know exactly what the final ranking is, I guess. But I'll start with number four, and a little bit anticlimactic because we're Vikings fans, so this should be number one. But I was trying to be objective. Number four, I think an interesting storyline, the fourth most interesting storyline in the home stretch of the season. What is it? 3 games. Um, is how far can Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings go into the playoffs? How will they finish out these last 3 games? Will they win out? That's like if the Vikings win out, they'll probably end up with the 1 seed. At the very least, they'll end up with the 2 seed if the Eagles somehow have a tie break. But it's looking like they would end up with the 1 seed. That's an incredible story. I would think that is one of the is comparable depending on how we would do in the playoffs is compare like very very comparable to like the 2017 Eagles or some of those um Giants runs with Eli Manning, although those were slightly different. Just some of these just like out of the blue um storylines I think is really interesting to see. How are they going to finish the season? Where will they go in the playoffs? I think the number three most interesting storyline to follow is what happens with Kirk Cousins in Atlanta. He's got a lot of money. They owe him a lot of money. He has no trade clause. Is he going to be benched for the rest of the season? Again, only 3 games. So I guess Penix will get his 3 games. Maybe they make the playoffs. If they make the playoffs, I can't imagine that Cousins will start in the playoffs. That's just all kinds of drama. Um, and then yeah, what happens in the off season? I guess is this is both a this home stretch of this season into the off season kind of storyline. Um, the second storyline, and this could have an addendum to it, but I'm kind of squeezing 2, potentially 3 things into it. But could the Lions and Bills meet in the Super Bowl is an interesting storyline, I think. Two teams that I mean, we just saw an incredible match against them this past Sunday. I think you know if they both got healthier, which is usually not something that happens in the playoffs, but if they were able to both get healthier, like there's potential that they're saying that Aiden Hutchinson could be back ready for the Super Bowl. That would be incredible. I hope that they're not foolish in that. You know, I would only want him back if he's fully healthy. Um, but
That feels a little bit to me like Rodgers trying to get back last
last year
year,
I
but
was thinking the same thing. Yeah. Um, so maybe it's just a motivation piece for the Lions, but you know, as long as there's not any more devastating injuries for either team, it could be a really interesting Super Bowl matchup. The Lions feel a little decimated right now. Um, I mean, I think equally you could throw in. I already have the Vikings, but you could throw in if the Vikings and Bills meet in the Super Bowl. That's also interesting. Just like 3 teams that have not had Super Bowl success um, and are unexpectedly good. I think that as far as this specific storyline, the Lions and Bills is a little bit more interesting just because of the past several years, kind of the chips on their shoulders and the expectations. There's kind of this sense that the window is now the Vikings window honestly is opening next year. And so we're kind of playing with house money, whereas there's some urgency with the Lions and Bills here as well
mhm.
as like their history. And then I think the
I
most
mean,
go ahead.
well, I could follow this up later, but
Yeah.
there was talk at the beginning of the season or before the season started of whether or not the Bills have missed the Super Bowl window with Josh Allen. Like that's
You're
just
right. I forgot
phenomenal.
about that. Yeah.
Anyways, go
Well, and
finish
Stephon
out.
Diggs leaving and stuff.
Yeah.
And then I think that the most interesting, I don't know, it's there's a part of me that doesn't want to do this because it feels so obvious. But I mean, if this happens, it's undeniably one of the coolest things that has happened in the NFL in recent years is if the Chiefs win a third Super Bowl in a row. I'm as far as like I like diversity, I like seeing new people, I like cheering for underdogs. So there's a degree to which it's maybe kind of a boring Super Bowl, but I mean, if it's like Chiefs versus the Lions or Chiefs versus the Eagles or the Vikings, and they win, I mean that'll be an interesting story to tell and to like tell your kids and be like, I saw I mean, we're for sure talking about Chiefs dynasty at this point. If they do that, I mean, we probably already are, but there is a degree to which like this will seal it. I mean, we'll be talking about legitimate like I feel like the GOAT conversation will come even more into like a kind of like I don't know, like who is the GOAT? Is it Mahomes or is it Brady? Like
Yeah.
Mahomes wins a third Super Bowl in a row, particularly with this team and the way they've played the last 2 years is very Brady-esque. And to win a third one with kind of a mediocre team is something that Brady never did. Um, and and even though Brady did do a repeat, he never did a three-peat. Um, always kind of had to reset for a couple of years before he was able to get back. So I think that that is undoubtedly just one of the most historic, long-term, interesting questions as far as like what will we be talking about from this season years from now? It would be a Chiefs three-peat. Some honorable mentions. Um, Dallas's embarrassing all-in season. Jaden Daniels' incredible rookie debut. The Schadenfreude of watching Aaron Rodgers just be trash. Um, Cincinnati's rough go. Like, do they make it into the playoffs? If they do, how far do they go? That'll be interesting. Obviously, if they lose one or two more games, then they're out. It's pretty unlikely that they make it to the playoffs. And then Chicago's total implosion. And it feels more like an implosion of a media storyline. Maybe this is the fourth one. I don't know. There's not much more to add to the story. This is why I didn't include the Chicago one. But just the fact, like I was looking at back at some of the articles and tweets people had about Chicago, and it's just embarrassing. Like people people were so high on Chicago, and they have just entirely imploded to a degree that I didn't even expect.
Did you watch yesterday's First Things First episode?
No, I don't think so.
They start their intro because Nick Wright chose the Bears to win the Super Bowl,
Oh, did he?
and he had
Nice.
Minnesota the worst team in the division. And so Kevin Wilde started the episode. He's like, "Welcome to First Things First, the episode where we're questioning that Bears is going to win the Super Bowl take." Right on the heels of Nick Wright's worst NFC North team smoking
Yeah,
his Super Bowl,
the Super Bowl.
which
I
he
just
has acknowledged, he
yeah,
has done a mea culpa on that quite a while ago. But
and yeah, like someone yeah, that take along with Peter Schrager, who has taken a lot of heat for this, but Peter Schrager had um the Jets going to the Super Bowl. Um,
what? Yeah, like that to me, this is me, the little low podcaster who's got 6 regular viewers on his episode. To me, those are almost fireable mistake hot takes for media analysts.
well, yeah, I mean Peter Schrager has accurately predicted the Super Bowl for the last 5 years. So
He has.
yeah, up until this
I
year.
did not know that.
Yeah.
But like that's just embarrassingly I would say that was a first guess. Like the
Yeah,
Jets, the Bears, they're
yeah,
not going to be that much better than what they've been.
yeah,
Like and maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm just feeling extra confident because they literally have been exactly how I thought they would be. So I
yeah.
feel pretty confident in these
Yep.
takes. Although actually both of them could end up worse than what I thought they would be. I
Oh, for
thought
sure.
both
Yeah.
would repeat last year's records, 7-10, and they'll probably actually they can't. They can't. None of them.
No, they're
No,
too far.
there's 3 more weeks. Yeah, they could go 7-10.
Um, the it would,
I've
if we do this again next year, we should predict the rest of the division's records as well as like. But anyways, go ahead.
yeah, that would have been fun to do. No, I like your top. So number 4, how far can Minnesota go with Darnold?
Yeah,
Number 3, what happens to Cousins? And kind of to dovetail on that, you briefly mentioned it, but Penix has the potential of leading the Falcons. The Falcons are still within reach of the
yeah,
playoffs. There has never been a rookie QB to come in week 10 or later where their team was at 500 or below to be able to bring their team into playoff. That has never
yeah,
happened. So, that would be a first if he's able to do that. But that is a fascinating thing to watch. And obviously, kind of this whole I was gonna say shabacle. Is that the word? Debacle. Yeah, with
shebang.
getting shebang, shenanigan, debacle, something. Everything that's happened in Atlanta with Cousins and so forth is just once again fueled the confidence of the Vikings brass and
Yeah,
being able to like, hey, that was a good decision. Move on from that. Number 2, could the Lions and Bills meet in the Super Bowl? I feel like that storyline is still going to be a question at the end of Week 18.
yeah, yeah,
but you're right in that like you could potentially see the Lions fall apart here. Like they could end up in the 5th seed and have to go on the road for all their playoff games, and that would
yeah.
be
That'd be rough.
a major turn of events for the Lions. I think the Bills have pretty much locked up. I mean, I don't know that they're going to get the Chiefs. I guess they could maybe still, um, but yeah, that is an interesting storyline. Can the Chiefs three-peat? I'll give you number 5 here.
All right.
Who's going to win the NFC West?
Oh yeah,
That division is entirely up for grabs.
yeah,
The Niners have looked horrible, but they're not out of the playoffs yet. Like they
yeah.
still could. The Rams are coming on strong, so they were my pick to win the division. I think they will win the division. But the hot take for you is I don't think Seattle's going to go to the playoffs. I think if anybody from the West is a wild card team, it's going to be the Cardinals. But that'll be an interesting
Sure.
thing
Yeah.
to. I could be.
It's
I've been about as wrong with Seattle as I have been Philly, but then there's just enough things that keep me from being like, okay, I'm just gonna ditch all the thoughts I've ever had about that team. Um, so yeah, that'll be interesting to see what comes of it. Should we dive into a state of contenders?
yeah. Let's do it.
You can give me some feedback here. So I'm looking at. Do I have 4 of each? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, I have 4 of each. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to start with some of the easier ones, maybe. So the Rams, I was like trying to think what is so essentially the premise behind this segment is what's holding this team back from winning a Super
Uh-huh.
Bowl? Like what's the thing that's gonna based on how they are playing currently, and when we look back on what the season has been like for them. Now, obviously, I think we need to acknowledge that there are mid-season adjustments, so we can't necessarily hold everything that's happened at the beginning of the season. But neither do I think it's entirely fair to be like, oh, the beginning of the season doesn't matter, and then you just go
Right.
off of what is recent. I think looking at the season as a whole, what are some themes? What are some Achilles heels that seem like they've kind of been there all along, maybe ridden underneath the surface? So for the Rams, I'm going to start with the Rams. I'll give you my 8 contenders, 4 from each side. I have Detroit, Philadelphia, Minnesota, and the Rams. Those are my 4 contenders.
Yeah.
Now, the Packers fans probably are really frustrated with me. And I actually, to be honest with you, am personally more nervous about the Vikings Packers game than I am the Vikings Detroit game.
Okay.
Part of that is because Detroit is so injured.
Yeah.
Part of that is also the Detroit game was just an even back and forth, like just this
Yeah.
wrestling match. Whereas the Packers game, the Vikings just
Weird.
dominated, manhandled. But then the basically half of the third quarter and most of the fourth quarter, the Packers kind of dominated it. So there's that
And they've
little
been good ever
fear,
since.
and they've been good ever since. Yeah. So there's that kind of twinge of like, what is this actually going to be like? So however, having said that, based on the whole season, I think Detroit deserves to still be considered contender. And I also think, and this is where the Rams have been a team that have been decimated with injuries throughout the season. And every now and then we've seen 8 games where they are able to be healthy enough, and they have one of the, I would argue, perhaps the strongest offense in the NFL. Like just explosive compared with Sean McVay, like able to scheme up stuff. I think we saw that against Buffalo. They proved themselves. So my question for the Rams, the thing that I think is going to prevent them from winning a Super Bowl, and maybe this seems a little simplistic, but it's, can they be consistent? That's the thing they've struggled with a little bit, is the consistency. They were pretty healthy against the Eagles, and yet they did not bring the explosiveness. And I think some of that may have to do, honestly, a little bit with Stafford's age. Like his age might be. You have the Eagles, who have a bully of a defensive line. Both their offensive and defensive lines are bullies. But then the Rams have a relatively young offensive line. They've recently changed through a lot of their veteran, both defensively and offensively. And so they got pressure to Stafford more than even compare the Vikings, who are really good at pressure, but they're not so much in the physically dominating sort of way. It's more just through speed. And I think the Eagles were just able to manhandle that O-line differently. But that's my question with the Rams, is can they be consistent? Like if they're consistent, I don't think you want to face them in the playoffs. I think they're I would potentially put them down for a dark horse NFC Super Bowl representative.
The Rams.
The Rams.
Yeah.
The second, then I'll go to the 2 AFC teams here. The Ravens, the thing that I think holds them back from the Super Bowl is, and I'll just be honest with you, like the bottom 4 of my list, I haven't spent just a ton of time. I haven't watched just a ton of Rams games. I haven't watched just a ton of Ravens or Steelers games. So maybe if you're a Steelers fan or a Ravens fan or whatever, like maybe you have more input on this, you can submit. But I think the biggest question, like Baltimore used to be known for their defense. This year, they are not known for their defense. Their defense is one of the easiest defenses to play against in the league. Now they have an explosive offense, and you don't want to go up against Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson but their defense, the Ravens are 22nd in points against, and they give up. Let me find them. They're kind of middle of the pack as far as total yards they give up, but they give up a lot of points as a defense. And so my question is, can that be fixed? Can they hone it in a little bit with? And also, I think it's also fair to the question is what kind of Jackson shows up in the playoffs.
Hmm.
Jackson has this distinct history of being different in the playoffs than he was all season long. And so there's that
Hmm.
question, even though they've been brilliant, he's been brilliant. He actually has better stats than Josh Allen does. So, like, we look at Allen as kind of being the MVP. It's like, well, why not Jackson? I think Allen has probably proven himself to be the most valuable player to a team. But anyways, that's the question that I have with the Ravens is what's their defense going to be like? I'm not intimidated by that defense. I'm intimidated by the offense, but take a look from a Minnesota standpoint where you have a top 5 defense and then a middle of the pack, top third of the league offense. It's like I'm not sure that I'm that intimidated by the Ravens, particularly because of how weak their defense is. The Steelers, and this was proven against the Eagles. Now, a couple things. They were without George Pickens, which is a big loss against the Eagles. But the Steelers have absolutely no run game. And if they do not have a run game, I don't think they're going to go
Yeah.
deep in the playoffs at all.
Yeah.
I don't know how you fix that. Arthur uh, Arthur Smith, is that his name? I
Yeah.
always want to say blank. Um,
He's telling me.
he's supposed to be known for run, but
Yeah.
like he was the Derrick Henry OC, wasn't he, with the Titans? The
Yeah.
big, but then last year, Bijan Robinson, he hardly
Yeah.
ran. This year with the Steelers, he's hardly doing anything with the run game, and I think that's going to be the thing that holds them back. They have a very stiff defense. They held the Eagles below 30 points, which is going to be, I mean, you're going to have to score 25, 27 or more to beat the Eagles in the playoffs. You're going to have to be able to score more than that. And you can't do that. Even though Russell Wilson has had his deep ball come back, he's been really good. You can't do that consistently. You can't score a lot of points consistently if you don't also have a run game. My number 4 is Kansas City's ugliness. Excuse me. I'm not picking against Kansas City. Last year proved us all year long they can look like they're not that good. And then they go and a switch is turned on. They go and win a Super Bowl.
Hmm.
I do think there's some things that are different this year as opposed to last year. First of all, that defense is not dominating like
Hmm.
last year. I think you can make up for a weak offense if your defense is the best, like really dominating, best in the league. That defense is middle of the pack. It's not that intimidating. They're so in points against the. I guess the Chiefs. I take that back. Chiefs are top 5 in fewest points against, but they do give up. Um, and they're top 5 in yards against. I don't know. Maybe I'm just totally. That's the thing that popped into my head as I'm thinking about it, is like this defense isn't that strong, but maybe it's because they're not like last year. They were the best defense in the league.
Yeah.
Like it just there's thing like last year. I was gonna say Josh Allen. What's that guy's name? Who's their QB? The Chiefs.
Patrick Mahomes.
Last year he was hitting them in the chest and they were dropping his
Yeah.
balls.
Yeah.
This year, please don't go any place dirty with I.
That
Um,
definitely was not.
this year, it seems to me like their O-line is bad enough. Patrick is running for his life. Like,
Yeah,
he's not I
he's
don't
not even
know.
throwing.
It's an ugliness that feels like it's going to be hard to just turn off or turn on the pretty switch come playoffs. So I
Yeah,
think that's the thing. It's like if they're gettable, like they are the best situational football team in the league, and they've done it
yeah,
over and over again. They've learned how to, whatever game they're playing in, we're going to find a way to get out on top, to get a win, and no, it's not the refs. Like, let's let's acknowledge this is just a good team that knows how to play ugly, and that's not a bad stat. Like, I don't know
yeah.
why people think that's a bad stat, but I do think that is the piece that I'm like, this feels a little uglier than last year. I'm not going to bet against them because of what we saw last year, but that's the thing that I'm wondering about. Then I'd like to dive into Detroit. This is easy. I think they are, from a large portion of the year, they were the Super Bowl favorites just in how they were playing. But with their injuries, I'm wondering if they can sustain that. And
Hmm.
probably, to be honest with you, more than injuries to their defense, I think the thing that may prevent them from a Super Bowl run is the injury to Montgomery, because
Hmm.
that was their game, and that's a piece that I think if you force Goff to have to throw a lot, he's not as he's not as good. Like that
Yeah,
stretch where he had a 100% completion rate in the middle of the season, like he wasn't throwing just a ton. A
yeah.
lot of that was the run game, and the run game is most powerful when Jamar Gibbs and David Montgomery are
Yeah.
complementing each other. Um, and so I'm worried with the loss of Montgomery, with the loss of a lot of defensive players. Can the injuries, can they make it through? And then secondly, Buffalo's defense, they have a bad defense, but they have the best offense. However, they have a bottlenecked offense. Can anybody stop Allen? I don't know. But if you can stop Allen, you stop the Bills. Like, they
Yeah.
don't have, and we saw that early on when the Ravens blew them out. We saw that early on in the season, a couple of different places
Mhm.
when they lost their games. If you can shut down Allen, the Bills aren't that much of a team. They don't even have. They used to be known. McDermott used to be known for a strong defense. I wouldn't really say they have that great of a defense this year. The Bills are, just a quick look here. They're middle of the pack defensively. Give up a lot of yards. They're bottom third of the league in yards given up. Um, so that's the question I have. Now, for Minnesota, I'm going to leave Philly for last. Minnesota, the question I've seen some. So I think the biggest X factor for Minnesota is Sam Darnold. Is he going to be? Is he going to be the Sam Darnold of the last 5, 6 games? They've had 7 straight wins, but 2 of those were still kind of in the ugly era. He turned over a lot. Is Sam Darnold going to protect the football? Is he going to hunt downfield? Is Aaron Jones going to have a good complementary run game? Those are the things that carry them deep. But I've seen some articles and some chatter about Minnesota's defense because they give up a lot of passing yards. And people feel, in short, we're running out of time, so I'm not going to go through all the details, but people feel like they have holes in their zone defense. And in short, yes, Minnesota does have some holes in their zone defense, and you already highlighted that Minnesota's been down corners. The weakest link in their whole team is the corner defensive position.
Hmm.
They've faced some injuries there. However, just a couple things to highlight. Minnesota is second in the league in takeaways. They're second in the league in points the defense adds, so scores that your defense is making. The Broncos are first. The Steelers are first in the league for takeaways. Minnesota is essentially tied for second. They're fourth in the league in points against. There are 3 teams that have given up 247 points, and then it's Minnesota at 252. They're middle of the pack in yards against. They're the best team against, second best team against the rush. But they give up a ton of passing yards. And that's the thing that people are like, well, you should pass against Minnesota. Well, here's the thing. Here's the piece. Like, that is the weakness. I think if somebody can exploit that, or if you can shut down, don't tell anybody this, but the Bears actually showed how to shut down Sam Darnold. Like, if you shut down the deep ball, then you force him to throw mid checkdowns, and he's not good. He overthrows on those. He's not near as accurate. So I was grateful to see O'Connell shift, and he throws. O'Connell has a develops a run game. Hey, I got to quick send a text here. O'Connell, I was excited to see that O'Connell was able to shift second half and get the run game going more. Because that's some of, like, early on in the season, we saw O'Connell like continue to force. He wants the strong passing game, continue to force it. And that I like to see as we're gearing up for the playoffs. Oh, he has the capacity to change plans.
Yeah.
And now he's got the run game, and they still blew out. Now, Darnold wasn't bad in the passing game. He just wasn't near as good as he's been, and it's because they shut down the deep ball. Yeah. But Minnesota's defense, so you compare to the Eagles, and we'll get to the Eagles in just a little bit. The Eagles are the best against the pass, but Minnesota has significantly more passing attempts against them. They have about 200 passing attempts 200 more passing attempts against them than the Eagles do. The completion percentage against Minnesota is very similar as the Eagles. I think the Eagles are around 63 completion percentage, maybe slightly over 63 point something. And Minnesota is right at 62 completion percentage. I'm sorry, the opposite way. The Eagles have the slightly better. So a defensive metric, you want a lower completion percentage. And then Minnesota's right up at the top as far as points scored. And historically, I look back the last 5 years, there's not that good of a correlation between giving up a lot of yards to giving up a lot of points. So the teams that go to the Super Bowl, last year was San Francisco and the Chiefs. They were the top 10 in the league in fewest points given up. They were middle. I think they were middle of the pack in yards given up. I think the Chiefs were like 12th, or maybe it was the Niners were 12th in total yards given up. The year before, again, the teams that go to the Super Bowl, they're really good at not giving up points, the defenses, but they're not necessarily the best at not giving up yards. And what's interesting is when you look, the Panthers, the Jets, the Bears, teams like that have all been top of the league in not giving up many yards. But they're not good teams, and they give up a lot of points. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not too concerned about Minnesota giving up. Is that their whole? Perhaps, and if I was an opposing offensive coordinator, I'd definitely be studying it to see if there's something to exploit. But Minnesota is the best, or top two of the. I can't say the best. They were for most of the year, but the last couple of weeks it's changed in getting takeaways as well as points contributed by the defense.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Eagles.
Sorry, can I just that points contributed? Yeah. We haven't had like a any sort of pick or fumble six for a number of weeks. So that must have all happened on the front end of the season.
Yeah. So I think the defense contributed points in each of the 5-game winning streaks to start the season.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Which is why I've been like shouting this on different Twitter threads and stuff. But like, Minnesota's offense has been way more efficient in the second half than they were in the first
Yeah.
half. But if all you did was look at the box score, it looks like they were better because the defense was contributing points there. But the
Yeah.
actual like quarterback on the field offense has been better in the second half than it was in the first half. Even with the Jacksonville game, the horrible stats that was. So here's the thing with Philly. I'm going to put a little bit on them. Who have they really played? Now, here's the thing. Minnesota has the third most difficult schedule in the NFL. The Steelers and the Patriots are ahead of them as far as difficult. The Eagles have the seventh easiest schedule in the NFL. But not only that, because they have definitely played, they go and they beat the Ravens. Look at them. They beat the Rams. Look at them. The Ravens and the Rams do not have good defenses. And so my question is, what are they going to look like when they play against a good defense? And more specifically, what do they look like when they play against a good offensive line? Because they haven't had too many good offensive lines that they've had to play against.
Mm-hmm.
And the Fangio defense works when you can bully the offensive line and put pressure on the QB.
Mm-hmm.
His defense is nice and soft. If you got the pressure on the QB, you force a quick pass and you have a high amount of incompletions. Philly does not. They're middle of the pack as far as takeaways, interceptions, and turnovers. They're just really good at causing incompletions and not being able to do a lot of in the passing game against them. They've also, like, Philly starts out slow and then they have a strong second half, whereas Minnesota over the course of the whole year has started out strong and then maybe give up some. When you start out strong, people don't run against you and they do way more passing against you. When you start out slow, teams are running against you, and then Philly has tremendous second halves. Like, you can never count Philly out because they come on strong. So those are my questions for them heading into the playoffs and what's going to keep them from a Super Bowl. Is I'm not sure that we've actually seen what they're going to look like when they actually start playing playoff caliber teams. Like, for instance, Minnesota, Detroit, and Green Bay. Like, anybody from the NFC has a good offensive line, that is top 10 in the league, and I'm curious what that would look like. I guess, to be fair, the Eagles did beat Green Bay. It was a fairly close game. It wasn't like that big of a win, but maybe that gives us a little bit of an idea of what they would look like against a stronger offensive line. But those are kind of the state of contenders, the things that I think might hold each team back. Anyways,
I like it.
What we don't have much time. Do you have any thoughts or things, or should we just jump into our picks?
Let's jump into our picks. I don't have much to add. That was very thorough. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. It kind of pairs well with my storylines of, like, how does this all turn out? Be interesting to see. Talk to us in
Yeah.
week 18.
Yeah. Okay, so just a rundown from last week. Christopher went 10-6. I went 12-4. I connived him into picking the Panthers over the Cowboys, which we both were royally upset on that. We also both picked the Steelers to beat the Eagles, and now it's like, okay, we'll stop picking against the Eagles.
Yeah.
My hunch is I've been wrong about Seattle in some ways, but I think I'm more right about Seattle than I've been about the Eagles. I don't think Seattle's that good of a team. And the Packers kind of showed it. Obviously, then Geno Smith got injured. Let's dive into picks for this week. Who are you picking? Broncos at Chargers.
I'm gonna pick Denver over Chargers. I think I've been picking the Chargers recently, but go Denver.
I'm going with Chargers. they're a team I can't give up on. I think I think they're good, but maybe not. Like I guess I do have some. The Broncos are kind of like the same thing. It's like, well, I think they're not as good as they are, but maybe they are actually good. um, Texans at Chiefs.
Kansas City Chiefs.
Steelers at Ravens.
Um, oh, I I have Baltimore over Steelers, but that that's a hard one. It's at Ravens, but I feel like if it was at Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh would definitely win. I think they won last time,
Yeah,
right? Pittsburgh typically wins over.
yeah. Pittsburgh won. Yeah, yeah. I think it'll be close. I'm worried though if Pickens, which I should check. I don't know if we know this time of the week. If Pickens can't play, then they don't even really have that much of a passing game, let alone not having a run game.
That was a question I had with Kansas City is if Mahomes is going to play, but honestly, I mean, it's Carson Wentz. I think I don't
That's true. I didn't think about that.
Carson.
Um,
Yeah, that's a hard one because Carson Wentz is a former starter. You know,
yeah.
I
Um,
imagine he can sub it.
Falcons over Giants.
Falcons,
Lions over Bears.
Lions.
Oh, you had said you were thinking of doing the Bears this week.
Yeah,
Just to troll the Lions or what?
yeah, and also I don't know. It just feels like there's going to be an upset somewhere here in the last few weeks. But
Who are you picking? Tennessee over Indianapolis.
yes, Tennessee over Indianapolis.
Indianapolis has been a bit of a shipwreck.
Yeah,
Bengals over Browns at Bengals.
Bengals over Brown.
Cardinals at Panthers.
Cardinals. You had already started.
Eagles at Commanders.
Eagles.
Rams at Jets.
Reeves.
Vikings at Seattle.
Vikings.
Jacksonville at Las Vegas.
I'm gonna go Jacksonville.
Do we have any different? We're all the same so far.
Oh, the first game we did.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I mean, it's so late in the season. It's hard to really.
Yeah.
Kind of know who everybody is at this point.
You want to pick Patriots over Bills?
No, Bills.
How about Niners over Dolphins?
Yes.
Oh, I keep saying it that way. Will they?
So I feel like that game, the Tampa Bay game, the Broncos game, depending on how the Chiefs game turns out, the Ravens game, those games all could end up like there's like 5 games here that are like we're both kind of picking all the same,
Yeah.
but there are some upsets that would be possible. Like the Cowboys, you just kind of never know. Like they're probably going to lose, but like they could win.
Yeah.
I'm picking the
Okay.
Packers over the City.
Yeah. Are you picking Bucks over Cowboys?
Yeah.
And I guess I didn't see ChatGPT included the Christmas game here, but we'll save
That's for
that
next
for
week. Yeah.
next week.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, we'll see how good we are. Thanks for joining us again, and yeah, we'll see you guys next week.
All right. See ya.